Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Melissa Rich, and welcome to the podcast, Taking Care of Your Temple. This is episode 26, and we are talking about communication. This is part 1. So before we talk about communication, let me introduce myself and give some background basics that I try to do every time. The objective of this podcast is to help women connect with God and, connect with Him on a regular basis, not just once, and use His power, strength, grace, wisdom, everything to improve their emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual health. And there are 4 ways that I talk about in this podcast that we can do that. The first one is to keep our focus on God. Keep looking at Him. Keep redirecting our attention back toward Him, because it is so easy to get distracted and to start chasing rabbits and go all over the place. So keep checking back with Him. Next is to acknowledge that we are not enough on our own. We are not strong enough, fast enough, rich enough, whatever enough to do things on our own. We need His help. And if we ask Him for it, He is happy to provide it. Next is to remind ourselves regularly. It is about progress, not about perfection. Thank goodness, right? Because honestly, if it were about perfection, none of us would make it. At all. And then the last thing is to work on consciously changing the messages that we give ourselves, because those messages tend to be automatic. Usually we've been hearing them in our heads for years. And if they're good messages, that can be great. But if they are not, they can do a lot of damage. So we need to figure out what we're telling ourselves and change them if necessary. And the verse that I found a while ago for this podcast is 1 Corinthians 3:16. Do you not know that you are God's temple and that God's Spirit dwells in you? Isn't that a great verse? We are His temple. All of us, not just one of us, but all of us. So I'm going to start off, as I always do, with a quick word of prayer. Lord, I just want to thank you for allowing me this vehicle. I just thank you for this topic today, because I think it is a really important and very timely one. I ask that I will do a good job in conveying what you want me to convey. And I ask your blessings on the people who are listening to this, that this will help them in their lives. Amen. So my goal is to do this on a weekly basis. So far, so good. And to give you guys some good tools and tips that will really help you feel and function better. Sometimes I will have an awesome guest like I did last week. Sometimes it will be just awesome me. Today it is just awesome me. So I am going to be, as I said, talking about communication. And several years ago, I've seen so many issues in communication that several years ago I wrote a book about it. And I'm going to be pulling a lot from this book. Now, I will be telling you later on how to get this book. And actually, because I record about 6 weeks in advance, I will tell you I don't have it available yet. I have the books. I haven't figured out how to make them available to you, but I have 6 weeks to figure it out. So by the time this podcast airs, I will have that resolved. So you will be able at that point to get a book. And in fact, I am going to remind myself how to get book, so I won't forget to tell you that part. Okay. So on to communication. Y'all, communication is just so vital, and we do it most of the time really badly. We do not do a good job communicating. I am fortunate in that I was blessed with the ability to communicate well, written and spoken. And a lot of times people can do one or the other. Some poor people do not do either one well. I thought that everyone could do this. I thought, anybody can write, anybody can speak, until I found out that, that really was not true. I was a family therapist for 30 plus years. And here are some of the issues that I saw where communication was creating problems. Couples not getting along, conflicts, lots of arguments, fights between parents and children. Some of these are going to sound really familiar to you. Disagreements between coworkers or between workers and bosses, because communication can create issues in personal relationships, in your home life and with friends and romantic relationships, but also in work. And most of us work. So it can be an issue all the way around. People suffering from some type of emotional disorder, such as depression, anxiety, or stress, all of these are so common nowadays. And lack of good communication really can make these worse. Another area I saw this in was blended families trying to blend better. And some of y'all have blended families, so you know what I am talking about. Business owners who were discouraged with how their workers were performing. Relationships that were trying to recover from the effects of an affair. This is a big one. Individuals who were discouraged about their job advancements or prospects or lack thereof. People who were suffering from low self-esteem, and divorced parents who were trying to get along well enough to co-parent together. So all of these communication effects, poor communication makes these issues worse. And these are just a few. There's tons more that I could have mentioned. Poor communication makes all of the above situations much worse, and it can often really help create the problem in the first place. Poor communication can be a real issue in personal relationships, and it can have the following consequences. Remember, this is poor communication. Misunderstandings. These can be ongoing and hurtful to both parties because there is no clear communication. Increase in conflicts. I saw this a lot when I was counseling, and people would tell me, we just keep having the same arguments over and over, and we never make any progress. We never clear anything up. And the reason they're doing that is because they're not communicating well. I mean, I've seen this over the years. Lack of trust. When people feel that they are not being heard or understand, it is hard to trust the other person. And so you don't really have a strong relationship. Increase in frustration. Issues go unresolved. As I was saying, they tend to have the same arguments over and over. They cover the same ground. And then lack of closeness. If people are not able to share effectively, they start drifting apart. I mean, I have seen this over and over. I saw this in my own marriage at times. Lack of effective communication can also impact the workplace, as I said, and it can be costly there. It can be costly in personal terms and relationships as well. There's a lot of research that shows that most difficulties in organizations are due to lack of good internal communication. And this situation can cause businesses to suffer by creating confusion. Employees don't know what the guidelines are because they're getting conflicting messages, and it can be confusing. A lack of trust. If people constantly receive conflicting messages, it can be difficult to know which one is right. What do I believe? Who do I follow? Decrease in motivation. Without clear communication, employees may feel that their opinion doesn't matter or isn't heard. And either one is going to make people not be very motivated to work very hard. I mean, why bother if nobody's listening or appreciating what you do? Decrease in productivity. Ditto. When they believe their input doesn't matter, and therefore they don't matter, they stop making as much of an effort. And so the company as a whole can suffer. Now, good communication skills, on the other hand, can have the following benefits in personal relationships. You are more likely to get what you want because of how you ask for it. Now, note that I say more likely, not that you will absolutely get it. You can communicate absolutely 100% clearly, and you still may not get what you ask for. Sorry, I wish I could guarantee that, but I've had that happen to me. I spelled it out exactly, and I still didn't get what I wanted. But you are more likely overall to get what you want when you ask for it well. Others enjoy being around you more because you're not surrounded by so much drama. I've known people, you probably have too, who everything is a big production and there's always all this drama going on, and it gets exhausting. I mean, I get to where I avoid those people, and other people do as well. I've seen that. Your life is calmer, more satisfying, and a lot more enjoyable. You have more time to do the things that give you pleasure because you're not always struggling with, why don't they understand what I'm saying? Why isn't this working? Because you are open and honest, your personal relationships tend to be more healthy and fulfilling. And in business settings, good communication skills can help because with clear expectations, misunderstandings occur less frequently. So the overall atmosphere at the company or at work is friendlier and more productive. More things get done quicker, better. Teamwork is increased, and employees are able to work well together to achieve departmental and company goals because, again, I feel appreciated. People are listening to me. My input is desired. So I'm going to make more of an effort. Innovation thrives in companies when employees know that their ideas are going to be received with an open, non-critical attitude. They're more likely to share their ideas. They start having more and better ideas. Employee retention is higher. Companies with poor internal communication, they have a lot of turnover. People don't stay very long because it's a frustrating atmosphere to be in. As soon as they can find something better, they're gone. So, like any new ability, effective communication has to be practiced on a regular basis. And none of us communicate well in every single area. We all have areas that we can improve in. And I'm going to be sharing some of mine as we go through. So again, you need to practice. So I'm going to start off with talking about the mechanics of communication. If people are not able to physically understand what you say, the best communication skills in the world are not going to be terribly helpful. And you've probably all experienced this. I have had conversations with people that I'm thinking, I'm getting about half of what they're saying. And I feel like an idiot because I keep saying, what? Huh? What was that? But I don't understand them. And so it's not very productive. So you need to be sure that the message you're sending is received and understood. And remember too, even if you're overall a good communicator, and I am mostly, but I still have areas that I work on, it can always be a problem under certain circumstances. When you are tired, stressed, angry, that's a big button for a lot of people. Sad, overwhelmed, scared, or worried. Any type of intense emotion can make it difficult to communicate. Okay, so the first section that I have is to be courteous when you communicate. And I'm amazed at how many people don't do that. One thing that consistently gets people in trouble when they're talking is they talk before they think. They think it, boom, it's out of there. It's just gone. They don't think about, wait a minute, how is this going to be received? People say things in the heat of the moment, and then they regret them later. In fact, a lot of times they deeply regret them, and they really wish that they could take them back. But of course, once it's said, you can't. So we all need to learn at times to press that pause button in our head so that we give this a moment of consideration. And I want to point out, not only do we need to do this in spoken communication, but we need to do it when we are texting and emailing as well. And again, it's most difficult to do this in things that you feel emotionally about. But of course, that's when it's the most necessary to do. So I want to give you an example, and I'm going to be giving examples. Oh, and I didn't say this too. I'm going to be doing, this is effective communication part 1. I'm going to be doing several parts of these, kind of going through my book, and I'm not going to do them back to back. So I'm doing part 1 now. I've got a couple of other things for the next several. I may do 2 or 3 other episodes, do part 2, do some more, do part 3. It's just going to be interspersed kind of as I see that it would be helpful or appropriate. So the examples that I give are all examples that are based on reality. These were from clients that I had, or from people that I knew, or from my own life. I've changed the names and some of the details, not only to protect the innocent, but to prevent people from getting mad at me if they hear. But these are all real situations, and some of them you can probably relate to. So here's the first one. First example. Joshua is 15 years old. He's going through typical growing pains. Yeah, not fun. He doesn't always keep his room cleaned up. Shocker. He has some kind of questionable friends. Sometimes he stays out past curfew, and his grades really are not where they should be and where he is capable of having them. His mother, Heather, is really pretty fed up. Then, on top of everything else, she finds a note from Jason's teacher in his backpack, dated a week ago. She tries to discuss things with Jason, but the conversation quickly becomes heated, and they end up yelling at each other back and forth while hurling accusations at each other. In exasperation, Heather finally screams at Jason that he is grounded for the next month and sends him to his room. Pretty typical, right? You've probably been in one of these situations, or you know someone who has. Now, after Heather calms down, how do you think she's feeling, and what is she thinking? She's probably feeling regret over some of the things that she said and didn't really mean. She's also probably feeling embarrassed because she lost her temper, and she's feeling guilty for acting like a teenager instead of the parent. Her thoughts are probably running along these lines. I can't believe I called Jason a selfish, ungrateful, lazy jerk. He's really a good kid overall. Why didn't I stay calmer? Now I've hurt him by saying things that really aren't even true. I'm the grown-up. Why can't I act like one? Why do I let him always push my buttons? Okay, so that's probably how she's feeling. Those are some things that she's thinking that are running through her mind. Now, here is how the situation could have been handled differently. Heather is speaking. Jason, I just found a week-old note from your teacher in your backpack. Why didn't you give it to me when your teacher sent it home? Stop. Give him time to respond. Well, I'm sorry, but you just forgot is not a good enough reason. I'm going to have to think about how to handle this. You take your backpack to your room right now. Get started on your homework. I am really angry and disappointed, and I need to calm down before we talk. Now, I can relate to this one from the other side because my parents used to do this to us when we were growing up. I remember one or both of them saying, I am so angry at you right now that I can't deal with this. You go to your room while I calm down. And we would. And we'd sit there and think, oh my gosh, what are they going to do? I mean, that was almost worse than what they did, just the anticipation of it. But it is a good way to handle it because here's what happens with that. Heather has a chance to settle down and collect her thoughts. She can think calmly about what Jason did and figure out an appropriate response to his actions, something that matches the offense, not something that's just totally out there. She has time to jot down the main points of what she wants to discuss with Jason so that when they do start talking, she doesn't get sidetracked. And Jason isn't able to pull her off track because they'll do that. Jason will respect her decisions even more because he'll see that they really weren't made carelessly or in anger. And this is what would happen to us when my parents would do that. When they would get back to us, sometimes it would be an hour or two later. We're just sitting there in our room wondering what's going to happen. We would know, okay, they put some thought into this. They really do mean this, and we would respect what they said a lot. And most importantly, Heather will not be stuck with an angry, sulky teenager in the house for the next month. I've had friends who have in anger told their child, you are grounded for the next 3 months. First of all, who wants to have an angry teenager in your home for 3 months? Really? Secondly, y'all, that's just too long. After about the end of the first week, most teenagers don't even remember why they are grounded. So it's not even effective. A weekend is a really good amount of time to ground a teenager. And it doesn't even have to be just physically. You can take their phone away. That's horrible. But don't start out with 3 months because one, you're not going to be able to maintain it. And two, it's just not appropriate. It doesn't teach them anything. A week is plenty, usually, for teenagers. Okay, so really, the best way to keep things from becoming too heated in discussions is to do exactly what Heather did, and that is to take a time out. Again, you can just tell people something along the lines of, this conversation is making me feel, fill in the blank, angry, frustrated, stressed, overwhelmed. And I'm going to take a break so that I can cool down before I say or do something that I will regret later. Let's get back together in, fill in the blank, half an hour, no later than tomorrow. 24 hours is the most you should do. And let's see if we can make any progress. This is a great way of taking responsibility for your words and for your actions. while giving yourself a chance to cool down before doing or saying something that you will regret. Figure out what you want to say, and I always recommend just writing down the main bullet points so that you'll remember what they are. By the same token, if you are exchanging heated, angry emails or text with somebody, take a break, step away, give things a chance to cool down. Another really common practice that's not helpful, and I've done it, I know that you all who are listening have done it as well, is to use the time while someone else is talking to think about what you're going to say. And as soon as they stop, you jump in because you want to get your points across. Okay. We've all done it, but it's not that helpful. Here's another example. John says, so at a meeting at work, I think the Merit Project would really be valuable to our firm, and we should commit to going after it. I think we're qualified to get it done, and I also think we'd help their company as well as making our company look good. John pauses to take a breath. Brian leaps in immediately, anxious to get his point across. I heard that the Merit firm may be getting a new CEO soon, and since no one's sure who it will be, they've formed a betting pool on it. John thinks, did he hear anything I just said? Brian's mind went off on a tangent as soon as he heard the words Merit Project. He was sort of following what John said, but not really. Here's how things could have gone differently if Brian had reacted differently. John talks about the Merit Project again. I think it would be good for us, good for them. He pauses to take a breath. Brian nods and maintains eye contact with John to let him know that he's listening. John continues, I'd really like you to take the lead here, Brian. You have expertise in this area, plus you know a lot of the Merit people. Are you okay with this? Brian, I'd love to. Tell me how you want this handled, and I'll get right on it. Okay, now I'm going to say right here, it doesn't always work out that well. You don't always get rewarded that quickly because you did the right thing. I just wanted to give a good example. A lot of times conversations get completely derailed and the original purpose is totally lost because we were too impatient. We wanted to have our say. We wanted our turn. So we weren't even paying attention to what they were saying. It's like a totally useless and unproductive type of thing. So the last point in this section is to learn to be a good listener. I'm not going to talk too much about that because you can find material on it everywhere, but I'm going to give a few pointers. One is when someone else is talking, try to figure out what their main point is. And you may have to ask them, or you may just have to kind of mentally review, okay, what did they just say? If you kind of keep track of what their main points are, you'll follow along better. Repeat mentally some of their conversations soon after you hear it. This will help it really lodge into your brain. We all communicate by a lot more than just speech. So watch their facial expressions and their hand gestures, because that will also tell you a lot of what's going on. Pay attention to those. Jot down notes during the conversation. If they ask what you're writing, just tell them, I want to write down the main points that you said so I won't forget them. You can also, if you're afraid that you'll forget your points, jot those down. Just use bullet points. Don't write a whole book. But that's a good way to help you make sure I'm not going to forget what I need to say. And then when there is time for it, you can say it. Give people feedback as they go along. So it sounds like you're saying that blah, blah, blah. Is that right? I mean, just check with them. I learned to do this with clients when I was counseling, because a lot of times I'm kind of sort of interpreting what they're saying. And most of the time I would get it right because I'd done it for a long time, but every now and then I wouldn't. I would say, so are you saying that when this happens, you want to do this and this? Most of the time when I would say that, they'd go, oh yeah, that's it. Every now and then they would say, no, it's really not that. It's more of this. And that's fine. Then I would just adjust. Oh, okay. I see. I get what you're saying. But keep checking in to make sure that you are on the right track. Don't just assume, because a lot of times we can assume wrong. And the last bit of wisdom I want to give in this section is not one that I can take credit for, but it's very good. God gave us one mouth and two ears. What should we do with that? We should listen more than we speak. Okay, next section on communication. We need to practice. Serious discussions. Well, back up. Most of us handle casual conversations pretty well. We can talk about our favorite sport team, the new movie we just saw, the restaurant we want to try. Those things we can handle because there's not a lot riding on the outcome. So those are easy. However, serious discussions are a horse of a different color. And that's directly from The Wizard of Oz, by the way, one of my favorite books and movies. Had to throw it in. Usually, serious discussions tend to be, well, serious, intense. They can be long lasting. They can be dramatic. They can also be very humorless and grim, not fun. And the big difference is that the outcome of these talks, they can have serious impact on us, not always in a good way. I also want to say that a lot of times we dread and avoid these conversations. We put them off. We don't like to do them because they're not much fun. And so then we just keep dreading them. So a lot of times what happens in these serious conversations, and one of the reasons people avoid them, because people start dredging up the past. Well, you said, or you did, whatever. They make accusations to each other. They end up calling each other names or shouting or throwing things or making threats. Sometimes there is physical violence. Y'all think I'm kidding, but I'm not. Years ago, I had this couple come in and they said they were there because they were arguing a lot. Okay. So I'm asking, well, what are some things that y'all argue about? What do you say? And so at one point I said, okay, well, give me an example. Kind of walk me through one of your latest arguments. So they did. They started, well, I said this and then she did this and I did that, whatever. And at one point I said, so what did she do after that? I don't remember what it was, but they looked at each other and the man said, she shot me. And I thought he said, she shocked me, like she did something that shocked him. And I kind of processed from it. I thought, wait, that's not what he said. And I said, did you say that she shot you? And they both nodded. And I said, with a gun? And they both laughed. Yeah. He ended up in the emergency room because she shot him because they were arguing. So, things can get out of hand. I've always wondered what happened to that couple. The point is, we all need to know how to have an important discussion while remaining calm, focused, and in control of ourselves. And that's what I'm going to kind of go over in this part. I'm going to give you some suggestions on how to do that. So the first thing is to figure out what you need to say and practice it. Okay. This may sound kind of unnecessary, but a lot of times it's not, especially if this is an important conversation you're having with your significant other or your boss that you really want to get something across. You want to be sure you say it right. So the first thing, again, practice it. Write out what you're going to say, but don't try to cover 20 points. Even if you have 50 points, pick 2 or 3. You can always get back and do more later, but start out with just a couple. Jot down your main ideas. Again, bullet points are good, and go over them out loud. Try to do it in front of a mirror and watch yourself while you're talking. Check to make sure things like, are you standing up straight? Are you making eye contact with yourself in the mirror? Do you speak smoothly without stumbling around a lot? Does your face look confident, or do you look kind of apologetic? Run through your lines until you feel like you've got them down and you can say them pretty comfortably. Next, because it tends to be difficult to be objective about ourselves, make an audio or preferably a video recording of yourself saying it. That way you can watch it and you can listen to it. And this will help you see and hear yourself the way other people do. So when you watch and listen to the recording, try to kind of assess. Do you look nervous or calm? Do you look or sound like you know what you're talking about? Or does it seem like you're just kind of making things up and throwing them in there randomly? Do you have any annoying habits while you speak, such as too much gesturing? I just gestured. Lots of you knows, which is one of my pet peeves. Too much or too little eye contact, slouching, chewing gum. That can always be annoying. Don't chew gum if you're having an important discussion, or don't have any mints or anything in your mouth. Just take it out. Are you talking too slow or too fast? And if you're talking fast, are you hard to understand? So kind of assess for those things. Now, after you've practiced your speech and you've recorded it and you've watched it, there's one more thing that you can and really should do, and that is to role play it. Get a family member or friend to practice this with you. Kind of explain the situation. It helps if they know the person that you're going to be talking to, and just explain what you're trying to get across. Have them be that person and you be you and say what you're going to say. Once you're done, ask them, okay, did what I say make any sense to you? If you were this person, how do you think that you would react to what I said? Is there anything else you can think of that I should add in order to get my point across, or is there anything that I should leave out? So all of these things can be helpful. Again, doesn't guarantee that you're going to get what you want, but you are definitely increasing the chances of that happening. So the last point I'm going to be talking about is to use clarity. Sometimes just the way words are physically spoken makes them hard to understand. I know of several people who talk so fast that I have to concentrate to follow what they're saying. I used to have this issue with one of my sons. He's gotten much better. But when Josh was in college or high school, and I would talk to him on the phone, I could almost never understand it because he talked so fast and he slurred his words. And I kept having to say, what? Huh? It was annoying to both of us. So be sure that you speak slowly and clearly, especially on the phone, because then they can't see your facial expressions or your gestures, so it is even harder to understand you. When I was doing counseling, this is back probably, almost 10 years ago. So before we had phones that would record the number, I would regularly have people leave a message and want me to call them back. Well, the problem was I couldn't understand them. I didn't get their name. I couldn't understand the phone number. I got about half of what they were saying, what their issue was. And a couple of times I even would pull in the secretary or another therapist and play it for them and say, do you understand this? Because sometimes I'm thinking, maybe it's just me, something wrong with my ears. But no, they couldn't understand it either. So I had several times where I couldn't return calls because I didn't know what the people were saying. So really be careful when you're talking on the phone because it can be hard for people to understand you. This can also be an issue of people not understanding you well if English is not your first language. I grew up in Latin America. I speak Spanish, and I always feel so sorry for people who are trying to learn English as an adult. Y'all, it is not an easy language to learn at all. It makes no sense. All the vowels have different sounds. The words that are spelled the same are pronounced differently or used for different things. It's a mess. But whatever the reason is, that if you speak too fast or you slur your speech, people are not going to be able to understand you. So be aware of that. Now, sometimes you're not sure if this thing about speaking clearly applies to you. And I've noticed that people who it does apply to tend to think that it doesn't. So a good thing to do is to ask a few other people, not just one. Check with 3 or 4 people, family, friends, coworkers, and just say, do I talk too fast? Do I mumble or slur my words? Or do I talk too softly? Just ask them. When I speak, am I hard to understand? And if you get just one person saying something and nobody else does, that may just be them. But if you get 3 or 4 people all saying, well, you really do slur when you talk, and sometimes I do have a hard time understanding you, it's probably right. You need to pay attention. Even if you don't believe it, record yourself. Excuse me. Once you are aware of the problem, make an effort to address it on a regular basis because it is probably not going to clear up on its own. You really have to work on that. I tend to have a soft voice. I've known this for years, and I have really had to make an effort to learn to project, and I'm better. But I still find that if I'm in a room where there's a lot of people talking and a lot of stuff going on, people can't hear me. I know that. Even if I speak loudly, there's something in my tone that it just gets masked by these overlying other noises. So a lot of times I would just leave if there's too many people because I'm like, nobody's going to be able to hear me or understand me. It's happened too much. When you're working on improving whatever it is, correcting whatever bad speaking habit that you have, get some accountability. Tell a couple of people, look, I know that I talk fast. I'm working on changing that. So if I start slipping back and I'm really talking fast again, would you just tell me nicely that I'm doing it? Because a lot of times, if that's your old habit, that's your default way of speaking, a lot of times you're going to slip back into it and not be aware of it. So get some people who will point it out to you. Learn to ask for feedback from the people that you're talking to. If you tend to speak fast or slur your words or whatever, and you're talking to someone and they are looking really confused, you may be doing it again. And just learn to say, okay, I've been told that I speak too fast or I slur my words. Have I been doing it again? And if they say yes, say, okay, I'm going to start over. I'm going to speak more slowly and clearly. I'm going to speak louder, whatever it is, but check with people. And if you need to, repeat. Again, if you feel like people are not understanding you and you're getting feedback that says that you don't speak clearly, record yourself, play it back, and work on the issues you have. None of us want to believe that we have those issues, but y'all, sometimes we do. So if you have difficulty having people understand you, here are some things that you can do. Join a local Toastmasters club. They have these like in every major city. Go to www.toastmasters.com. This is an organization that helps you learn how to speak well in front of people, and it develops leadership skills. I highly recommend them if this is an issue for you. Take some speech or I don't know if I'm saying this right. I looked it up. I think it's elocution lessons. That is where you speak clearly. And I would look online to see if there are any classes available locally that will help you. Find some helpful videos online. Check with YouTube. And I hate to say this because I think I just mispronounced that, but if I have a word that I'm not sure how to pronounce, I Google whatever the word is and pronunciation, and then I play it. You can find recordings that will tell you how to pronounce it, and I will play it several times. And I did that before this one, and then I forgot. Sorry. Join a community acting group because you will get experience speaking clearly, projecting, and emoting appropriately. Or if you have a good singing voice, maybe you can join a local choir. A good musical director is going to make sure that you're practicing breath control and that you're enunciating well. That's also fun. So those are some things that you can do that can be helpful. Now, the book that I am getting this from is called A Year of Building Success Through Clear, Concise, Cooperative Communication, Melissa R. Rich, PhD. And I will say at the moment, the best way to find this will be to go to my website, which is www.drmelissarich.com, or you can email me, info@drmelissarich.com. And again, 6 weeks from now, when this episode goes live, I will have figured out a way for you to get it if you are interested. Okay, fun fact, Waco, Texas. Or this is kind of more about Texas than Waco, but that's okay. Texas is the only state to have had the flags of 6 different nations fly over it. They are Spain, France, Mexico, the Republic of Texas, the Confederate States, and the United States. And although 6 flags have flown over Texas, there have been 8 different changes of government. It was Spain, 1519 to 1685. That was a long time. French, 1685 to 1690, not so long. Spanish again, 1690 to 1821. Mexico, 1821 to 1836. The Republic of Texas, 1836 to 1845. The United States, 1845 to 1861. Confederate States, 1861 to 1865. And the U.S., again, 1865 to the present. I mean, we kept switching around. Okay, that is it for this episode. And I just want to say, as always, along with this podcast and Waco Hypnosis Center, I'm available for public speaking. So if you're interested in having me for an event, you can contact me through my website, or you can email me. Also, the main points that I've done here will be available in the Facebook group, which is Taking Care of Your Temple group. So you can find that there. If you enjoyed this podcast, ladies, if it was helpful to you, and I think it probably was, I would love for you to do one or more of the following. Write me a review. Tell everybody how wonderful it was. Share the episode. Follow the podcast. I'm really working on building up my audience, and I'm getting better at social media, but I could always use some help. And some of you do this so well. It's like breathing to you. So if you'd like to help, I would love that. All right, that is it for today. Again, we will have more communication in the future because I think it is such an important topic. We get into trouble so easily by doing it wrong. So next time will not be about communication. It'll be something else, but there will be more communication in the future. Everyone have a good day. Thanks for listening. I will catch you next time.